Hello, everybody. I'm pleased to be back with the third presentation on research basics for the developing countries. And today I'm going to talk briefly about different types of thinking. I'm going to offer just an overview in this about 10-minute clip. Uh, I will discuss different types of thinking in greater detail in subsequent presentations. So let's get started. Uh, First of all, we need to understand what is thinking. And while we all know what is thinking, we all think about things, we want to identify a few main features of thinking. So there are one can say there are 5 or 6 different types of characteristics of thinking, but I've narrowed them down to 3 major elements of thinking. So the first one is that any thought, like our brain or mind, it produces thoughts. So any type of thought, that whether it happens spontaneously or whether it happens because we intentionally try to think, that will be thinking. So even when we are idle, some type of thinking is going on in our mind. Some random thoughts, or we might see something around us and we'll think about it, or we might be doing something and we have to think about what we are doing. And so, for example, we buy something, now we have to pay, so we are thinking about how to take the wallet out, or how to make the payment. So all that is basically thinking. Another important feature of thinking is that it's an activity that is created by the brain when we are posed with a problem or a possibility. So if we have a situation where we have to solve it, then we think about it. And we think about the options, or think about how that problem can be solved. Or if we are giving different options or possibilities, and we have to pick one, or we have to compare them, then we are thinking. So that's another important aspect of thinking. And third important aspect of thinking is that it's the process of forming an opinion. So we gather information, we gather knowledge, we gather different type of views, we read, we listen to other people, we listen to experts, like you're listening, like I'm giving this talk, so if you're listening to me. So when all this information gets into your brain and mind, you think about it so you can form an opinion. So all these characteristics of thinking, they are very important to understand, because when we talk about science, or when we talk about knowledge, thinking is a crucial element to it. So, or for it. So we can only process information, or when we know how to think about it. Now, there are different types of thinking that pertain to science and research, or management, or problem solving, or understanding our existence. And we can group them into, we have specific terms for them. Now here I'm going to just mention, these are 12 different types of thinking. There are probably a few more as well. And one can argue that probably some of these 12 can be combined to make them 10 or 9 or 8. But I put them together in a way that they are in pairs. And the pairs have many similarities, but also they have that they are different in a way that they may be opposite ends of the same type of thinking. Now, as I said in the beginning, I'm not going to go into the details of each type of thinking, but I'll just mention them so you can get some idea. And then I'll discuss them probably in pairs or a few at a time in subsequent talks. So concrete thinking is when we think about things literally. And literally means exactly the way they sound or exactly the way they appear. So we don't approach them abstractly. So abstract is sort of opposite of concrete. So if I say the proverb, don't throw stones if you live in a glass house, or if I say some type of poetry, and the other person takes it literally as the words say, as the words mean, we will say that's concrete thinking. But if someone is able to understand the abstractness in those words, then we will say the person is thinking of these words in an abstract manner. Then is analytical thinking and critical thinking. They are related in the sense that analytical thinking is basically that you analyze in a real scenario, in a real data, in a real problem-solving manners, but you analyze in the real format. And so you try to get as much data, as much information about a problem and different options, and you analyze which option suits best. Once you have analyzed, once you have done this analysis part, then comes the critical thinking. So it's sort of an extension of analytical thinking. Critical thinking is basically being devil's advocate or being critical or being skeptical. So once you have analyzed the situation and you have reached a strategy to solve a problem, and there are, say, 3 steps required to solve the problem, then you analyze critically each of those steps in a skeptical manner, that what if it doesn't work? So you extend the analysis part into the critical part. Divergent and convergent thinking are evaluating a problem in a manner that you want a solution, and if you are looking at different type of solutions, then that will be divergent thinking. But if your aim is to find one solution that will address a couple of 2, 3, or 4 problems that are at hand, then you are trying to analyze this problem or think about the problem in a convergent manner. So as the words say, divergent meaning spreading out, convergent meaning things that are spread out, you combine them or bring them together. So those are two interrelated types of thinking. Then linear thinking is basically that you break down the problem into different components and you focus on solving each problem individually in a linear manner. So if you have to get from A to D, you break it down from A to B, then B to C, and C to D, and then you say, okay, now what do I need to do to get from point A to point B? So linear thinking and non-linear thinking is a good example is in terms of supply chain or in terms of management issues. So you have different levels and you want to address each level in a linear manner. Non-linear will be when you are not taking that linear approach. So you're not looking at from A to B, B to C, and C to D. You're basically focusing on how to get from point A to point D. Reductionist thinking and holistic thinking, they are again sort of opposite to each other. Not exactly, but they're technically the process happens in a manner that they are opposite to each other. So reductionist model is that you identify one problem, you get to its solution, and then you try to further dissect that solution to understand what was in that solution that really solved the problem. So, and this works well in the biological models. So, for example, if you have a medication that works in a certain condition, you try to reduce it to the underlying biochemical mechanism. And once you get down to the biochemical mechanism, you realize that it can be further divided down, and you divide it further. And that will be the example in one of my previous talks. I think it was the second talk where I mentioned the amine hypothesis of depression. So if we look at that, that's what happened. Initially, it was 3 amines, then we went down to 2, and so we went down to different types of receptors. So we kept reducing, kept getting to the lower level of problem solving. Holistic, on the other hand, is trying to understand the problem holistically and offer a solution from all different aspects so that the problem gets addressed. And again, we use holistic models in healthcare as well. So so when we treat someone for depression and we are giving medications and we are also giving psychotherapy, and then we know that the person has the type of depression that responds to light therapy, and we are recommending light therapy as well, and we are encouraging X to do physical exercise as well, then we are taking a holistic approach. Then comes the applied thinking and creative thinking. Applied thinking is when we think about a problem so that we can come out with applicable solutions. So it takes the theoretical aspect of thinking or research out of research. It focuses on how a research can be used and applied to real life scenarios. Creative thinking, on the other hand, is more about coming up with ideas that are unique, irrespective of whether they can be materialized to offer something practical or applied or not. And creative thinking also is used in non-scientific aspects to performance arts or to literature, or so people can be creative. And so these are major types of thinking. And to extend the point about thinking a bit further, I want to highlight that our thinking is basically an interaction between emotions, thinking, and our biases. And biases, they are of different types. And I'll talk about them down the road as well. There will be a few talks on biases because biases interfere with scientific thinking, a scientific methodology. Emotions also interfere with scientific experimental thinking. So we have to understand that they are linked together. And what science aims at doing is that when we, as an individual, have an opinion or have a thought or approach a problem with a certain type of solution, that is our subjective perspective. And once we try to remove and subjective, when we have a subjective position or a subjective assessment of a problem, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It only means that it's subjective. It is one person's opinion. We need science. What science aims at doing is it takes away the subjectivity so that the problem can be approached in a more objective manner, without biases, without emotions, without preconceptions, so we can reach a solution that is not biased or that is not based on our emotions. Now, before I go into talking about different specific types of thinking, my next talk will be further explaining the difference between subjectivity and how we remove subjectivity to become more objective. So I'll provide a brief overview of that. This talk ends here, and as I always request that if you find these talks helpful, please share with your friends. Please invite your other friends as well. This is a personal initiative to improve scientific understanding in the developing countries, to improve, to encourage people to think scientifically and hopefully to start doing research. So thank you very much. Bye.